She was always silent. Until she confessed her feelings to the human soldier. The station smelled like old metal and aggressive cleaning fluid, the kind that made your eyes water and your memories of childhood bubble up inexplicably. Jonah Rusk leaned back in his chair, balancing on two legs like a man tempting both gravity and military protocol, which to be fair he did on most weekdays. He stared across the dimly lit control hub of Juno 7, a station so far out on the edge of civilized space it might as well have been stapled to the bottom of the galaxy's sugar vending machine. Behind him groaned and spat out something that looked like a protein bar but might have been a confused brick. Jonah caught it with the reflexes of someone who had lost several teeth to similar projectiles. He peeled it open, sniffed it and made a face like it had just told him its political opinions. This tastes like betrayal, he muttered. No. One laugh that wasn't unusual across the room. Sat Varel. She sat straight back, as if the chair were judging her posture. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, boots polished to a near blinding gleam, and those ears long, tapered, gently curved at the tips like elegant parentheses on either side of her skull. They twitched slightly, either in annoyance or Morse code. No one really knew. Jonah took another bite of the bar. It crumbled like it had lost the will to live. He chewed it anyway. He'd been on the station for 3 months, and in that time he'd spoken to Varel exactly 11 times. 9 of those were mission briefings. One was when he'd asked if she was allergic to peanuts, and she blinked at him like he'd just proposed marriage in Swahili. There last time she had nodded at him, just nodded, but the nod had weight, the kind of nod that might mean yes, no, please stop talking, or I can kill you with one hand. He was still trying to figure it out. The intercom buzzed overhead. Commander Esther's voice crackled like an angry robot with dental problems. All personnel to observation deck B now. That includes you, Rusk, and wipe that look off your face. Jonah stood stretching his back until it made a sound like breaking a wishbone. He tossed the rest of the protein bar into the recycler, where it was immediately vaporized with what might have been a sigh of relief. Observation deck B was misnamed. There was very little to observe unless you had a deep interest in static and the occasional passing rock. Still, the whole crew crammed in, wearing varying degrees of uniform correctness. Varel stood near the viewport, her hands folded behind her back, face expressionless except for the mild glint in her eyes that said she'd already finished the assignment. None of them had started yet. Esser entered carrying a data pad in the usual look of someone who had been up since the Battle of Orion's elbow. She gestured at the display screen, which lit up with a glowing map of disputed space. The Archon Syndicate sent a scout. It veered off route and pinged our perimeter before jumping out again. They're testing us again. Groans, mild swearing, one very loud sigh from Lieutenant Tren, who had once tried to file a complaint against the concept of space itself. We're not retaliating, Esther continued. We're not escalating. We are peacekeepers. That means we smile, we wave, and we report. Do we smile with weapons? Jonah asked. You smile with your face, Rusk, not your sidearm. He saluted with an exaggerated flourish. Varel's ears twitched again, probably disapproval or possibly amusement. He held out hope. After the meeting they were paired for patrol. Of course Issa loved doing this. She said it helped cross-cultural bonding. Jonah suspected it was a punishment for his habit of customizing his uniform with sarcastic patches. Today's red emotional support meet shield. They suited up in silence. Jonah tried to hum a tune to fill the void. It came out like a confused waltz. Varel didn't comment. She rarely did, but today, when he handed her the scanner, their fingers brushed. She blinked. That was new. Your hands are warm, she said, her voice soft, slightly melodic, like glass rolling across velvet. So are yours, he replied too quickly, then immediately regretted it. I mean not too warm, just healthy, normal warm. She tilted her head. He braced himself. This was the part where she would say something deeply logical that made him feel like he just tried to outwit a calculator. Instead she just walked past him. They patrolled in silence. Technically they were scanning for anomalies, but the most anomalous thing on the scanner was Jonah's heartbeat, which had decided to practice jazz. He kept sneaking glances at her out of the corner of his eye, pretending to check for heat signatures. She moved like poetry, trying not to be noticed. Efficient, graceful, focused. Jonah moved like a man who knew their vending machine by name and had argued with it. When they got to the far end of their whole walk, she stopped, looked out into the endless dark. Jonah stood beside her, unsure if he should say something. Do you ever think, she began, that space is too quiet? He blinked. Isn't that the whole point? No atmosphere, no noise. I mean, Emotionally, he paused. Oh. They stood in silence again, different now, not awkward but full, like something was being said between the lines. Jonah cleared his throat. You ever wonder if the stars are just nosy neighbors watching us mess up? I think they're patient, she said. They wait for us to figure things out. He looked at her, she looked at him. Her ears flicked once, then the scanner beeped. Anomaly, of course. Duty calls, he said. She nodded, a real nod, not a maybe death nod. He liked this one better. As they walked back, Jonah thought, maybe she doesn't hate me, maybe she's just quiet, maybe she's just watching. And somewhere behind that silence something had begun to stir, something warm and strange and shaped a little like him. The briefing room had two working chairs, one that creaked like it was considering early retirement, and one that was essentially a wobbly suggestion of a seat Jonah always took. The creaky one, it was the kind of chair that complained in a deeply personal way every time he shifted, like it was cataloguing grudges in alphabetical order. Varl sat across from him on a crate that claimed to be military grade but looked suspiciously like it had once held oranges. Today's mission reckon sweep of Sector Gamma 7, also known as that place with the weird radiation that makes your teeth itch. The syndicate had been flying suspiciously close to that sector. Command wanted eyes, ears and plausible deniability. Jonah wanted lunch, ready to scan some radiation ghosts, he asked, adjusting his gear and slapping a sticker on his shoulder plate that read, do not disturb unless coffee. Varl blinked. There are no such things as radiation ghosts, not with that attitude. She tilted her head slightly. You joke often, it's a defense mechanism, he said. Cheerfully, keeps me from collapsing into existential dread. Also, the alternative is humming, and no one wants that. They walked through the corridor to Dock Bay 3. The station lights flickered dramatically as if trying out for a horror movie. Jonah smacked the wall. It flickered back at him, unimpressed. Inside the shuttle, Vel took the pilot's seat. Jonah did not question this. The last time he flew, they'd landed sideways and had to be rescued by a cargo drone with a personality disorder. Just to be clear, Jonah said, buckling in with all the grace of a man wrestling a seat belt that didn't want to be touched, if we die, I want it known that I had nothing to do with the navigation system's inevitable betrayal. Varl didn't look at him. I adjusted the system. So you're saying we might actually go where we mean to? Yes, well, that's no fun. They launched into the black stars, stretched like gossiping fireflies, and the shuttle hummed with the quiet arrogance of well-maintained machinery. Jonah watched her work. Her fingers moved with precise intention, like she was playing an invisible instrument that only she could hear. She said nothing, but her ears twitched once or twice, and he was beginning to understand that was her version of small talk. After a while he broke the silence. So Varl, got any hobbies when you're not piloting us into probably death? I study linguistics. That's cool. I tried that once, got confused when I found out flammable and inflammable mean the same thing. Haven't trusted words since. She turned slightly toward him. I also write really like what battle reports, angry emails to command. Poetry, he stared. You poetry, is that surprising? No, I mean yes, a little. You've got this silent assassin vibe. Didn't figure you for the hearts and flowers type. It is not hearts and flowers, right? Of course. What's it about then? She paused. Mostly observations, emotions. There difficulty of translating feeling into speech sounds deep. She hesitated. Some are about you. The shuttle made a small innocent beep. Jonah wished it had been a siren instead, something to distract from the words still echoing in his skull, like they'd taken up residence and were redecorating me. Yes, he cleared his throat and looked very hard at their blinking nav console. Are they a flattering poems or more like ode to that bipedal nuisance? Both. That's fair. They landed on Gamma 7's outer moon, a rocky little dirt ball with too much static charge and absolutely no tourist appeal. The air was breathable for about 5 minutes, so they stuck to suits and scanned in silence mostly. Jonah tried to whistle through his helmet at one point, which came out as a sort of wheezy chirp that scared away a perfectly nice bird-shaped drone. You were late, she said. I prefer to think of it as dramatically timed. Builds character. You missed the part about the diplomatic passenger. There's a diplomatic passenger. Yes. Oh good, I was worried today might be boring. Varl didn't roll her eyes. She was far too dignified, but her ears twitched in a way that implied deep and personal skepticism. Their shuttle was small, overclocked, and painted a shade of grey. So uninspiring it could cause mild despair in the colorblind as they ran the pre-flight checks. Jonah found himself watching her more than the gauges. You ever think we spend more time with each other than with anyone else? He asked. Yes, you say that like it's not weird. It isn't, it kind of is. You talk more than most humans. I've been told it's a defense mechanism, I am aware. He grinned. Please. She remembered the diplomatic passenger turned out to be a Trovian ambassador, approximately the size of a refrigerator and twice as sweaty. It introduced itself as Ambassador Blur, though the U sounded more like a hiccup than a vowel. It carried 3 data cubes for ceremonial scarves and an expression of perpetual horror as they lifted off. Blur sat wedged into the third seat, making noises like a whale having a panic attack. I hope you enjoy the flight, Jonah said cheerfully. We offer complimentary fear and a wide selection of existential dread. Do not speak to the diplomat, Varl said. Why not? Because he is already terrified and you are not helping. I'm helping a little. You are helping negatively. They were halfway to the rendezvous point when the first anomaly hit. The sensors went red, then blue, then gave up and flashed purple in existential confusion. The shuttle jolted hard like it had remembered a childhood trauma. Was that turbulence or a small localized apocalypse? Jonah asked, clutching his seat. Inference. Something is scrambling our path, Varl said, hands moving over the controls like a conductor in crisis. Blur emitted a low-frequency whimper. Jonah tried to peer over the console. That distortion's not natural, looks like a phased minefield. Old syndicate tech, Varl said, obsolete but still dangerous. Much like Commander Esther's sense of humor, we will have to navigate manually. I'll get the duct tape. Varl's eyes narrowed. I am serious, so am I. It's surprisingly versatile. She took over their controls, piloting with calm precision. Jonah monitored the sensors occasionally, swatting Blur's trembling tentacles off the console outside the viewport space. Shimmered oddly like it was wincing as they dodged the last pulse mine. Something flickered on the long-range scanner ship. Jonah said, dead ahead. No lights, no signal. Varl brought them closer. The ship was a civilian hauler floating lifeless in the dark, its hull scarred and cold. They docked cautiously, guns drawn. Jonah went first. I feel like I should say something heroic here, he muttered. Save it for after, Varl replied. They entered darkness, the kind that swallowed sound. Jonah's flashlight flickered. Something clanged in the distance. I hate this, he whispered. Fear is rational, she said. I'm not afraid. You are vibrating. That's adrenaline and charm. They found the crew unconscious, signs of neuro disruption but no physical damage. A weapon perhaps, or something worse. Varl scanned the air. Saw horrific. Agent very localized, no longer active. Someone wanted them asleep, not dead, she nodded. They revived the captain, an older human with a mustache that seemed to have achieved sentience, and got the systems back online. The captain muttered something about a shadow before collapsing again. Jonah looked at Varl. So sabotage testing grounds, or someone just really hates cargo? I don't know yet. They left their ship stable and returned to the shuttle. Blur had eaten 3 of the scarves and was trying to chew a 4th. Jonah gently took it away. That was weird, he said. Yes, you know what that means. Another report. An AA will shout, and Varl turned to him, ears twitching. You will say something inappropriate, and then she looked at him slowly. We find out who did this, he smiled. That's what I like about you, Varl. You always skip to the part where we hunt space criminals. Her eyes lingered on his face for a moment longer than necessary. Jonah, yeah, you vibrate less when you're focused. I'll take that as a compliment. It was. They sat in their shuttle, the stars wheeling slowly around them, silent and watching. Something was moving in the dark, something deliberate, and neither of them for once was joking. Jonah had once claimed that the best part of working with alien technology was how often it exploded incompletely. New and educational ways. The worst part, according to him, was that it also exploded when he was trying to make coffee, which was what he had been attempting to do when the station alarm began wailing in the same key as his childhood nightmares. Not again, he groaned, staring at the smoking remains of his mug. This is the 3rd time this week. Varl's going to think I have a vendetta against appliances. Outside the rec room, their corridor lights were pulsing emergency red like someone had been murdered by aesthetics. He jogged toward the command deck, dodging a rolling service droid who seemed equally panicked. Varl was already there, standing in front of their central console with the posture of someone who had given up on hope but still had a quota of calm to fulfill. Her Ears twitched just once, that was enough to make him straighten up and try to look like a professional instead of a man who had just tried to electrocute a cappuccino. "What did you do?" she asked without turning. "Why do you assume I did it?" "Because you were near the mess hall and the fire suppression system triggered itself. That could have been anybody." There was a note taped to the machine that read, "This time I will win," in your handwriting. "I feel like you're jumping to conclusions." The station's logs have 3 separate entries for unauthorized caffeine experimentation by Rusk J.O.K. but technically Jonah fine coffee incident. Aside, what's going on? She tapped the console, bringing up the shuttle telemetry. "The civilian ship we recovered last cycle, it's missing as in it forgot where it parked, or missing like taken by space pirates. Missing, there was no propulsion trail, no jump trace, it vanished." "Well, that's ominous, also incredibly rude. We just fixed that ship." She turned to him fully, her expression unreadable except for the almost imperceptible angle of her ears. "Something is interfering with local space, subtle distortions like folded light. It isn't natural, sounds like syndicate trickery." "No," she said quietly. "Worse, it moves with intent." He gave a short nervous laugh. "Intent like, I'm going to rearrange your atoms, or, I want to have a polite discussion about wormhole ethics." Closer to the atoms. They were ordered to investigate the site of the disappearance. This time Command sent a backup team, a pair of grumpy engineers and a diplomatic observer who seemed deeply disappointed by everything around her, including their air. As they boarded the shuttle, Jonah leaned toward Varel. "Remind me again why we keep saying yes to these missions. Because we are technically still employed. I feel like our job description should just read, go toward danger and make sarcastic comments until resolution or explosion. I've read worse briefs." The flight was tense. The engineers argued about the polarity of a sensor module. The observer made notes and sighed with world-weary disdain. Varel flew in silence. Jonah chewed a protein bar that claimed to be meat-flavored but may have been lying. The coordinates brought them to a stretch of space that didn't like being looked at. The stars blurred, the sensors twitched, something in the distance pulsed like a heartbeat too large to be real. "I hate this place," said one engineer. "It's just space," said the other. "No, it's space with feelings." The missing civilian ship appeared ahead, floating dark, power drained. Varel docked carefully. They boarded. The air was cold, lights flickered. Half alive, Jonah led their way, blaster drawn, trying not to think about ghost stories. Varel followed, scanning with a narrowband frequency that made Jonah's fillings itch. "No crew," she said, "no bodies, no damage. They just left or were taken." They reached the bridge. The ship's logs were corrupted, every file replaced with static except for one, a short clip of the crew sitting quietly unmoving there, eyes wide, their expressions vacant. One by one they stood up, walked out of frame, and never returned. "That's creepy," Jonah whispered. The observer muttered, "This is a violation of half a dozen interstellar accords." "I'm more concerned with the part where people disappeared into thin air." A humming started, low, distant, almost musical. Varel turned her head, ears angled like tuning forks. "It's resonating," she said, something beneath the frequency of the ship's systems. The observer touched her calm. "We should leave no arguments here," Jonah said, but as they turned to go, the hull vibrated. The shadows on the walls lengthened, not with movement but with absence, like something had unzipped a corner of the universe and forgotten to seal it shut. Back to the shuttle now they ran. Jonah dragged one engineer by the collar. Varel covered the rear, moving faster than Jonah had ever seen her. They boarded, launched, and didn't stop until the stars stopped bleeding sideways. "You know," he said over the comms, "this place reminds me of my ex's apartment, cold, empty, and full of unexplained debris. Did you love her number?" "But I did love her cooking, which, come to think of, it is why we broke up. She wanted me, I wanted her. Carbonara, romantic, tragic, really." They hit a signal spike. Varel narrowed her eyes, adjusted her scanner, and crouched down. Jonah covered her, partly out of protocol, partly out of instinct. She didn't need it. He knew that she could probably disarm a bomb with one hand while baking a metaphysical sonnet with the other, but still the data came in a flare of energy. "Not syndicate, something older." Joan appeared over her shoulder. "That's not a friendly reading. No, want to poke it anyway?" "Yes." They set up a remote drone to inspect the source, a shimmering anomaly caught between dimensions like a soap bubble having an identity crisis. While it scanned, they sat on a nearby rock. Jonah offered her a protein bar. She Sniffed it. This contains squash. It contains something I wouldn't recommend. Reading the label it gets defensive. She took a small bite. Her ears twitched. It's awful, she said. I know it's comforting, isn't it? She looked at him, really looked. He met her gaze and felt like he'd just tripped and fallen off the emotional high dive. No water, just starlight and a question he hadn't learned how to ask yet. Jonah, she said, if you left this station would you forget me? He laughed. Not mocking, just surprised. Forget you? You're literally the most interesting person here. You think I'd just stroll off and erase the one person who makes me feel like less of a walking disaster? She looked away. Her ears trembled just a little. The drone beeped. The anomaly pulsed. They both stood, brushing non-existent dust from their suits back to work, but something had shifted. Not much, just a thread tied quietly between one quiet alien girl and one very confused human with a bag of terrible snacks and too many feelings on their way back to the shuttle. Varl spoke again. Jonah, yeah, I may write another poem about me perhaps. He grinned wide and uneven. Cool, just don't make it rhyme. I couldn't handle a romantic limerick, not from you. I make no promises. He decided right then that he was never going to get transferred, not without a fight, not without her. Jonah Rusk was late. He wasn't just late in the traditional I'll be there in 5 minutes or since. He was cosmically, fundamentally late, the kind of late that made calendars weep and clocks give up on tracking linear time. He was halfway down corridor 19, his boots thudding against the metal like a drum solo composed by Panic. Why is the mess hall suddenly on the other side of the station? He muttered to no one. Did they rotate the station again? Do we even have that feature behind him? The hallway lights flickered ominously, as they always did when something important was about to happen, or when the station cat Sergeant Fluffus had chewed through another cable. He arrived at the briefing room looking like he'd wrestled a mop and lost. Commander Esther didn't look up, but the vein on her forehead pulsed in recognition. Glad you could join us, Rusk, she said. Did time forget you again? I took a shortcut through deck for there was a gravity malfunction. I flew. No one told you to use deck for. No one told me not to. She pointed to the last empty seat. Jonah sat with the exaggerated caution of someone who knew chairs could hold grudges. Varl sat 2 seats down, perfectly still, hands folded, eyes on the hologram flickering at the center of the table. Her ears twitched once as he entered. He considered that a greeting or a silent scolding. Hard to say. Their briefing was all tension and acronyms. Something about a civilian transport gone dark near the edge of diplomatic territory, possibly syndicate interference, possibly just bad wiring, and worse luck the word escort mission was used, which usually meant the next 4 hours of your life will include gunfire, screaming, and a report due by morning. When the meeting ended, Varl was already beside him in the corridor. She had a way of appearing like she'd always been there, like space itself bent to make room for her. Silence in the silence that followed. The observer finally spoke. I will recommend this region be quarantined. Can we recommend our pay be quadrupled? Jonah asked. No. Then this day continues to be disappointing. They returned to their station. Command was grim. AA issued orders with the urgency of someone who had just read the last chapter of a horror novel and realized they were in it. Varl said little. Jonah said too much. As usual, later in the hangar, Jonah found her checking their shuttle for residual anomalies. He walked up carrying a new coffee mug with "totally safe now" written on the side. You okay? I don't like anomalies. I thought you studied them. Studying is different from surviving. He handed her the mug. I figured you might want something that doesn't beep. She held it, stared at the words. I wrote a poem, she said, about the mission number, about now, about fear and coffee. That's quite the combination. I had to get the balance right. He leaned against the shuttle. Read it to me. She hesitated, then quietly she recited a few lines. Sharp, strange, beautiful, not about monsters, not really, about silence, about presence, about him. He didn't say anything when she finished, just nodded. I liked it. I wrote it in case something happened. Well, he said, raising his mug, next time let's just write emails instead. Let me get this straight, Jonah said, holding the data pad like it had personally offended him. We're escorting a crate. Not a crate, Varl replied. A relic, right? A mysterious crate-shaped relic that's being worshipped by a species of jellyfish monks. Because that's not suspicious at all. Vel didn't look up. From her diagnostic scan, it is an artifact of spiritual significance to the Orvani clergy. Our job is to ensure it arrives intact. Then why does the crate have its own security clearance retinal lock and a warning label that says do not meddle in for languages because the Orvani have had it stolen 7 times once by a janitor? Religious relic theft by janitor, that's a whole new genre of crime. It was a very determined janitor. The Hangar Bay crew moved with deliberate caution, circling the crate as though it might explode, sing or recite poetry at them. Jonah watched one technician flinch when it beeped. Okay, so who's coming with us on this crate pilgrimage? Just us, no backup, no second team, no engineer with a bad attitude and an eye patch, no, so it's just me, you and the highly flammable sacred box. It is not flammable, I bet it wants to be. The mission was straightforward: take the relic to the Orvani temple, moon of Lis, avoid unwanted attention, and definitely don't open the crate. The instructions were very specific on that last part. Their clause under penalty of implosion was bolded as the shuttle detached from their station and drifted into the black. Jonah ran a passive scan on their surroundings. All clear for the first 10 minutes, then the proximity alarm began whining. Oh, good, he said, we've attracted company. Varel adjusted the display. Unregistered vessel following us at low range, no signal, no ID. Maybe they're just lonely or opportunistic or bored. Space pirates. The unregistered vessel did not respond to hails. It didn't even pretend to be polite. It just hung there like a mosquito with an engine watching. Should we lose them? Jonah asked. I could invert the shuttle's polarity. Will that help? Number, but it sounds impressive. They kept course, watching the dot on their radar like it might sprout teeth. Meanwhile, the crate continued to do nothing, which in Jonah's opinion only made it more suspicious. Do you think it's listening to us? He whispered. It is an object, so are microphones. Varel didn't dignify that with a response. Several hours into the trip, the crate beeped again, this time with rhythm. A precise 3-note chirp. Was that Morse code? Jonah asked. No. Was that space Morse code? There is no such thing yet. The beeping stopped when Varel glared at it. Jonah was starting to suspect the relic respected her more than it respected him. By the time they reached Lisver's orbit, the pursuit ship had fallen back, vanishing into a radiation belt with all the subtlety of a guilty toaster. Jonah filed a report with the station. Varel docked the shuttle. Lee's VS surface was a serene lattice of crystalline structures, like someone had turned a snowflake into a city. The Orban monks hovered toward them, translucent and luminous, greeting them with gurgling sounds that required a translator with both linguistic training and an existential tolerance. Welcome seekers, their leader said. You bring the eyes of Vel, I just carry the luggage. Jonah muttered. The monks escorted them into a sanctum where gravity felt like a polite suggestion. The relic was placed on an altar encircled by ceremonial plasma orbs, which Jonah tried not to touch. You have our gratitude, the monk said. Please stay for the rite of whispering light. Is there food? Jonah asked. There is. Enlightenment. So no snacks? Varel nodded respectfully. We will attend. They were given robes. Jonah's didn't fit, but he wore it anyway, hoping to blend in with the jellyfish monks. He didn't. He looked like a confused beach umbrella. The ceremony was slow, melodic, and strangely beautiful. Light refracted across the chamber in living patterns, and the relic began to hum softly, responding to the monk's chants. Jonah leaned closer. Is it supposed to levitate like that? It is activating. Varel whispered. Is that good? It is expected. Expected like sunrise, or expected like taxes. Their humming grew louder. The relic floated higher. The monk swirled around it in perfect spirals, and then with a final burst of harmonic vibration it cracked open. Jonah flinched. That crate had one job inside: was not a weapon, not a mystical gemstone, not a doomsday device. It was a book-worn, ancient, radiating piece. The monks gasped while they gurgled dramatically. Same effect. The lost teachings. The lead monk in a vial. The first listener. Jonah raised a hand. So you're telling me we just smuggled a sacred space diary across 2 sectors while being tailed by someone who probably wanted to sell it on their black market? Yes, the monk replied. Jonah turned to Varel. Is it too late to ask for a pay raise? Always, as the monk celebrated with a resonant song that made Jonah's knees tingle. He and Varel stood quietly at the edge of the sanctum. We did good, he said. Yes, even if their relic tried to beep at me in the shower. You imagine things it beeped. Varel, it Beeped. She allowed herself the faintest smile. Back aboard the shuttle they prepared for departure. The monks had gifted them each a ceremonial orb. Jonas blinked occasionally and emitted faint giggles. He watched her as she secured the logs, her posture as composed as ever. But he learned to see the flickers, the slight tilt of her head, the way her ears angled toward him even when she faced away. You were quiet during the ceremony, he said. It was not my place. You're allowed to feel things. She looked at him, her expression unreadable but not closed-eyed. Did she? Said he. Nodded. Same here. They didn't speak for a while. The shuttle hummed. The orb giggled again. Next mission, Jonah said. Can we escort something less mysterious? No, like a cactus or a box of cheese. She tilted her head, considering cheese melts, cactus has needles, so we're sticking with relics and space weirdness. Yes, he sighed. At least the relic didn't explode yet. I have a bad feeling about this, Jonah said. Which was usually how things started going very wrong or extremely sideways. He was holding a new mission briefing in one hand and a ration bar in the other, neither of which seemed to inspire confidence. You have a bad feeling about everything, Varro replied, her voice calm as ever. She was sitting across from him in the tiny operations lounge, sorting through a crate of scanner nodes that looked like angry toys. Yeah, well, the last time I didn't have a bad feeling. We were nearly eaten by a singing cloud. I'm learning to trust the paranoia. This is not a singing cloud. It's a diplomatic escort escorting a politician, he said, waggling the data pad. From the Ghani Dominion, a diplomat with 8 legs, no sense of personal space, and a strong opinion about soup. Ambassador Threll is an important peace figure. She tried to forcibly hug me last time with all 8 arms. I lost 3 pens and a sock. She liked you. She thought I was her assistant. You were wearing a name badge that said, "Hello, my name is Assistant." It was ironic. Varl finished assembling the last node with a click that sounded disturbingly final. We leave in 1 hour. Try not to spill anything on the ambassador. Spill me never. He promptly dropped his ration bar. It landed on the scanner crate and immediately stuck there with a noise like betrayal. The shuttle flight to Jirani space was relatively quiet, which made Jonah even more anxious. Ambassador Threll greeted them in the docking bay with the energy of a caffeinated octopus, pulling Jonah into a deeply unwelcome embrace that caused his spine to make a small offended sound. You smell like anxiety and cinnamon, she announced happily. That's just my shampoo, Jonah muttered. Threll then turned to Varl and offered a stately nod that somehow felt like the opposite of Jonah's full body grappling. Varl returned the gesture. Nonplus, you honor us with your presence, Threll said with the gravitas of someone who definitely believed they were being recorded for history. I serve the peace, Varl replied evenly, and the tall one serves snacks. Jonah said they were led into the dome capital complex, which resembled a giant seashell made by someone who liked spirals and regretted straight lines. Inside, various alien delegates floated, slithered or hovered through their halls, each exuding self-importance like an aura. The summit was designed to smooth tensions between Jirani human colonies and the Frey Accord, who unfortunately had recently accused humanity of cultural crimes against symmetry. Jonah didn't know what that meant, but he suspected it had something to do with his socks. Their job was simple: accompany the ambassador, avoid conflict, and don't speak unless absolutely necessary. Jonah immediately broke all 3 rules by commenting on the canopies. These taste like flavored sadness, he whispered. Why are they all damp? They are ceremonial, Varl whispered back. Be polite. I'm chewing their diplomacy. The first meeting began with a ceremonial introduction that involved 13 different titles and at least 1 interpretive dance. Jonah tried not to blink too obviously. Varl stood still and impassive, though he noticed her left ear twitch ever so slightly during the harmony leap section. Threll took their stage, declared her love for all sentient beings, then began a passionate speech about galactic unity that involved 3 metaphorical jellyfish and a surprisingly aggressive haiku. Jonah leaned over. Did she just rhyme tolerance with consonants? Let her work. Then came their response from the Frist envoy, a tall shimmering figure who resembled an iridescent fern and sounded like someone had taught a crystal how to sulk. Their argument was that humans were aesthetically offensive and spiritually disruptive, citing erratic fashion and unpredictable facial expressions. Jonah couldn't help himself. We're not unpredictable, we're just very creative with eyebrows. The room went silent. Everyone turned. The Frist envoy looked personally insulted. Threll made a noise somewhere between a cough and a despairing squawk. I will apologize formally, Varel said, quickly stepping Forward, my companion suffers from acute mouth reflex. It's chronic, Jonah. Added later in the private quarters provided by the Goni Jonah paste while Varel ran a security scan on the walls. So in summary, I've insulted a glowing fern, made an ambassador cry with my sandwich comment, and possibly started a minor fashion-based incident. You left out the part where you accidentally activated the ceremonial gong. I was trying to lean against the wall. It was not a wall, it was an ancient musical relic. Then it should not have been shaped like a bench. She looked at him, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. You're not a diplomat, no, pure. Not subtle, also true, and yet you're still useful. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was an observation. He smiled. Same difference that night there was an attempted breach in the conference archives. Varel caught the intruder, an undercover agent disguised as a dessert cart. Jonah arrived just in time to tackle a tray of decoy. Are we sure they weren't real Claire's? He asked while wiping custard off his face. Positive. Then I regret everything there. Security incident shifted the summit tone. Tensions rose. Delegates accused each other of sabotage, manipulation, and improper ballroom technique. Jonah and Varel worked overtime to keep things from collapsing entirely, which mostly involved stopping Threll from giving motivational speeches about emotional jellyfish and chasing away spies disguised as floral arrangements. On the final day the accord teetered on collapse. Then Varel stood and, to Jonah's shock, delivered a speech. It was short, precise, deeply moving. She spoke not as a soldier or emissary but as someone who had lived between species, between expectations, someone who had learned the fragile art of listening. Jonah didn't breathe the entire time. When she finished, the room fell silent. Then the fresh envoy bowed a deep, graceful gesture. Threll burst into tears and threw a bouquet of damp vegetables at the podium in celebration. Jonah approached her after. You were incredible. I said what needed to be said. No, I mean you. That was, I didn't know you could speak like that. She tilted her head. Do you want a recording? I want to remember it, he said, because that was the first time I've seen you let your walls down. She didn't reply, but her ear flicked just once toward him, a whisper of warmth in a sea of silence back on the shuttle. As the stars stretched by, Jonah finally spoke again. You keep surprising me. Is that a complaint? Number, it's why I stay. He half expected her to deflect, to make a joke or offer a ration bar, but instead she said nothing, just sat beside him close enough that he could hear the rhythm of her breath like a heartbeat. He hadn't known he missed the cafeteria on station Zephyr 9 was a miracle of bad decisions. The coffee came in 3 suspicious colors, all of which tasted like battery acid mixed with hope, and the chairs were designed for species without hips, vertebrae, or dignity. Jonah sat in one, now elbows on the table, staring at the monitor projecting the debrief report he had no intention of reading. They gave me a medal, he said. Do you know how rarely they give medals to people who talk with their mouth full? Varel stood nearby methodically, slicing an unidentifiable protein brick with the kind of precision normally reserved for surgery, possibly because those people don't usually survive long enough to be awarded anything. I'm starting to think you don't admire my improvisational skills. I admire that you're still alive. Statistically, it's impressive. Was that your version of sentiment? He asked, because if it was, I'm going to need a minute. She arched an eyebrow. You're not crying internally. It's a slow leak. The summit had ended 2 weeks ago, and the ripples of its success were still spreading. Treaties were being signed, borders were relaxing. The Frist envoy had even sent a bouquet of geometrically perfect flowers accompanied by a note that read, your face remains confusing, but your ambassador's words were appreciated. Jonah had pinned the note to his bunk. Now back on Zephyr 9, life had returned to its usual pace, confused, chaotic, and one minor disaster away from poetry. Varel had been summoned to a formal hearing with the High Commission tomorrow. Jonah was pretending it wasn't bothering him. So you're leaving tomorrow, he said casually, like it wasn't the loudest sentence in his head. She nodded. Only for a few weeks. Sure, weeks like star seconds, practically nothing. You'll survive. You always say that when you're about to do something dangerous. It's tradition. He looked at her, not the way he usually looked at her, half a glance, maybe a smirk, maybe a sarcastic comment balancing on the edge of his teeth, but really looked at her, the stillness in her, the way her ears angled ever so slightly forward when she was paying attention, the calm she carried like armor but softer, now cracked in the way light sneaks into a room. Do you remember, he said slowly, the first week we met? You Wouldn't say more than 10 words to me. I was assessing your threat level. Rude. Accurate. You told me I talked too much. You said I asked too many questions. You still do. He leaned in, but you answered them eventually. She said nothing. Her eyes were still searching. Jonah swallowed. Okay, listen, I've been thinking, which I know is alarming, but I've realized something. Varel tilted her head. Is this about the unauthorized use of the diplomatic emergency escape pod again? That was an accident, and I maintain that button looked exactly like the coffee dispenser. But no, this is about you and me and the fact that I don't want to do this without you. A beat to her hand, still holding the utensil. Still completely. I'm not good at silence, he went on. I fill it with nonsense, jokes, noise, but when I'm with you I don't mind it. I like your silence. I like you, and I think I've liked you since the first time you threatened to shoot me for humming in the vents. Her voice when it came was soft. You are not easy. I've been told I'm like a crossword puzzle inside a maze on fire, and yet he waited. I have come to depend on your noise. He blinked. That's possibly the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. It is not a confession, she added quickly. It is an observation. He grinned. Same difference. This time she smiled, not a full one, just enough to shift the orbit of the room. They spent the rest of the evening reviewing sensor logs from the summit, not because they had to but because they didn't want the moment to end. Jonah pointed out every delegate who looked like they were about to sneeze. Varel flagged 10 minor security flaws and accidentally invented a new encryption pattern mid-rant. At the end of the night she walked him back to his quarters. Outside the door they paused. Be careful tomorrow, he said. I always am. That's what worries me. She hesitated. I will return. I know, but I had to say it anyway, you know. Tradition. He stepped back and she turned, then paused without looking at him. She said, I once read that humans believe in something called the one, a person who understands them completely. We do, he said, or at least we pretend to. And if I told you I have never understood anyone less than I understand you, but I still wish to be near you, I'd say. Jonah replied, heart thutuing. That sounds exactly like love to me. She turned to face him fully. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice, low and steady, reached him like gravity. Then let's pretend together. When the door closed he leaned against it, smiling like an idiot. Somewhere in the station's guts the old ventilation system gave a sympathetic wheeze. 3 weeks later she came back, not with fanfare, not with banners, just a quiet arrival, a calm nod and one extra coffee ration she placed on his desk. Without comment, welcome back, he said. I missed the noise. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. They were still the same, and not peace was always tentative. Danger still lurked in star fields and shadows, but amid it all, two odd creatures found each other across the noise and silence, and that was enough, maybe even everything.